Mr. Minister, we welcome Your Excellency to the quarterly open debate of the UN Security Council on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. We note the active role of the Algerian delegation, the purveyor of the aspirations of the Arab world in the Security Council, in keeping various important aspects of this topic a focus of the Council's attention. We would like to thank the UN Secretary General for his briefing on the situation in the Middle East, where for more than 15 months now, the bloody Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been raging. Just very recently, we heard reports of an agreement reached between Israel and Hamas on a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. As far as we're aware, the agreement was approved by both sides, and a few hours ago it entered into force. One would like to hope that the result attained through the mediators will last. Nonetheless, this is a reason not only to be glad, but also to take stock of the sad situation. We must not forget that over these months, the inhabitants of Gaza paid for this with their own lives. Over the past 15 months, the military operations by Israel in Gaza killed at least 47,000 Palestinian civilians. The exact figure will only be known once the rubble is cleared. Such civilian losses have not been seen in the world since the Second World War. This bloodshed should have been stopped much earlier. However, each attempt by the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution with a call for an immediate ceasefire came up against Washington's veto that referred to its so-called quiet diplomacy, did everything it could to ensure that the Security Council did not hinder Israel's actions on the ground. Russia, right from the beginning of the crisis in Gaza in October 2023, along with like-minded countries, consistently sought to establish a lasting ceasefire and put forward the first resolution calling for this. We also insisted upon an urgent need to supply humanitarian assistance to all in need. It is a bitter pill to swallow to know that despite these efforts, the UN Security Council still was not able to implement its mandate because of the actions of one permanent member. As far as we can tell, the deal concluded a few days ago doesn't fundamentally differ from the deal that was discussed back in December 2023. This begs the question: was the fine-tuning of its details really worth the thousands of lives that were lost since in Gaza? And this thought, frankly, does not spark joy in us, despite the fact that a deal has been concluded, is something, of course, that Russia welcomes. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, yesterday saw the start of the first phase of the deal providing for the release of 33 hostages held in the Gaza Strip in exchange for a group of Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. The implementation of this first phase will help to assess the sustainability and viability of the entire agreement. It is a cause for cautious optimism that, despite the difficulties in the initial phase, on the 19th of January, the first Israeli hostages were released, as were detainees held in Israeli prisons. From that point in time, pursuant to the provisions of the deal, military hostilities stopped in the Strip and the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces was started. We note the start of the withdrawal of Israeli armored vehicles from Rafah and also the return home of thousands of inhabitants of the town. However, let's have a look at the first page of the New York Times today. On the photo of the houses where Palestinians lived. These aren't houses, they are just ruins. We note that the agreement provides for an increase in the volume of food, fuel and medicaments supplied to meet the Gazans' needs. According to the representative of the WHO in Palestine, with Peppercorn, it will take many years to rebuild the healthcare system in Gaza and at least tens of millions of US dollars. Less than half of Gaza's hospitals are currently operational. The issue of supplying sufficient volumes of humanitarian assistance to Gaza should become a priority of the work of the Council. Now the Council can work properly, so we should focus on implementing them. We commend the efforts of the mediators, first and foremost Qatar and Egypt, thanks to whose painstaking and persistent work this important agreement was reached. We note that at the final stage of the negotiations, representatives of the new American administration got on board, who, as we understand it, helped ultimately to overcome the repeated stubbornness of Israel. We trust that the implementation of the agreement will pave the way for a stabilization of the situation in Gaza, for a return of those who temporarily and on numerous occasions been displaced, who are in their millions, and to rebuild Gaza, which is currently lying in ruins and reminds us of scenes from a post-apocalyptic film. And also reunite Israeli hostages and Palestinian detainees with their families. We expect that these will include the Russian citizen in Gaza, Alexander Tufanov. We have repeatedly said that the ceasefire in Gaza is a precondition for stabilization for the entire region. The implementation of the agreement gives a glimmer of hope, not only for a lasting normalization of the situation in the area of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but also creating conditions for long-term improvements in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. Furthermore, there is now an opportunity to create conditions to establish a comprehensive political settlement process for the Palestinian question on a broadly recognized international legal basis, the ultimate aim of which is the establishment of an independent Palestinian state within the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living in Israel. The implementation of the two-state solution alone, approved by UN General Assembly and Security Council resolutions, will help to curb the vicious cycle of violence and will help to bring genuine, lasting peace to the region. As is clear from recent years, no agreement which bypasses the matter of a just settlement of the Palestinian question will ever bring about peace in the region. However, this is still far off. The recent months of war have highlighted the problem of a lack of mutual trust and have led to radicalization on both sides. The long-awaited deal is fragile, and any provocation may upend its implementation. It's important in particular for Israel to stop its practice of building new settlements in the OPT and expanding the existing ones, and it needs to comply with UN Security Council resolutions. It is pertinent how and who will monitor the ceasefire. On both sides, voices are already rising up of those who are not happy with the agreement and who are just waiting to accuse their opponents in violation of their agreements. It is the duty of the entire international community to protect this ceasefire and to strengthen the voices of those Palestinians and Israelis who prefer peace to war. From our side, we will carefully follow the implementation of the terms of the deal, and we will support any initiative focusing on an unconditional and comprehensive ceasefire, on ensuring safe and unhindered humanitarian access, and on relaunching negotiations on the recognized international legal basis, including the decisions of the Security Council and the General Assembly of the United Nations. Thank you very much.